So, you sent over some stuff about FAA pilot medical certificates.
Mm-hmm.
And it really got me thinking about something I'd always kind of taken for granted.
Oh, yeah.
Just assumed it was all pretty straightforward.
Right.
But there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to try to do in this deep dive is really unpack these regulations,
Yeah.
make sure that by the time we're done, you have a crystal clear understanding of what these different medical requirements are.
Yeah.
And more importantly, what they mean for anyone who's involved in flying, whether you're a pilot yourself or just interested in aviation.
Right.
We're going to focus specifically on the three main types of FAA medical certificates.
Okay.
You got your first class, your second class, and your third class.
Exactly. When you think about aviation,
Right.
the focus is often, on the planes themselves, the skills of the pilots.
Yeah, the technical stuff.
But your health as a pilot is absolutely fundamental to safety. And so these medical certifications are the FAA's way of ensuring that foundation.
That makes sense.
So let's start by looking at that first-class medical certificate.
Okay, first class. Now, if I'm just thinking about hopping in a Cessna
Yeah.
for a weekend, John,
Right.
this probably isn't what I need to be worrying about, is it?
That's right. The first-class certificate is primarily for those who hold what's called an Airline Transport Pilot Certificate,
Oh.
the ATP.
ATP, okay.
So think of the pilots flying those big scheduled airliners.
Right, the ones with hundreds of people on board.
Exactly. The ones responsible for getting all those passengers safely across the country. And often employers in other areas of professional aviation also mandate this level of medical clearance.
So if you dream of flying for a major airline someday.
This is the one you'll need.
Got it. So this is the top tier, the most demanding one.
It is.
What kind of medical scrutiny are these pilots under?
It is pretty
It
rigorous.
sounds pretty intense.
To get a first-class medical, you'll need a very thorough examination by an FAA-authorized Aviation Medical Examiner,
Okay.
or AME.
AME, all right.
These doctors have specific training to understand how certain medical conditions might impact a pilot's ability to handle the unique stresses of flight.
Right, because it's not just the average person walking down the street.
Exactly. From altitude changes to G-forces,
Yeah.
It's more than just a regular checkup.
Okay.
They look at your overall health with a very specific lens.
So, like, tailored to the demands of flying?
Exactly.
Mm.
Vision standards are quite strict.
Uh-huh.
You'll need 20/20 distant vision in each eye,
Wow. Okay.
though that can be corrected with glasses or contacts.
So 20/20 or better.
Yeah.
Absolutely crucial when you're scanning the skies for other aircraft.
What else is involved? Well, cardiac health is a major focus,
Okay.
particularly as pilots get older.
That makes sense.
So an electrocardiogram, or ECG,
ECG. Okay.
is required for first-class medicals.
Got it.
Now think of an ECG like getting a snapshot of your heart's electrical activity,
Yeah.
making sure everything is beating in rhythm.
Mm.
Especially important for the demands of airline flying.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's required once a pilot turns 35, and then every year after they reach 40.
Oh, wow. So pretty frequent checks there.
Yeah, this helps to catch any potential heart issues early on.
Right.
And of course, the FAA has a list of medical conditions that they deem disqualifying for flight.
Disqualifying conditions?
Yeah,
That sounds like it could be a whole deep dive on its own.
it definitely could be.
Can we at least touch on like a general idea?
Sure, generally these are conditions that could potentially lead to sudden incapacitation
Oh, wow.
or affect your cognitive abilities in flight.
So things that could really impair your judgment or your ability to react quickly.
Precisely.
Okay, so that gives us a sense. So this in-depth medical evaluation doesn't last forever, right?
Yeah.
There's an expiration date on it?
Precisely, the validity period for a first-class medical depends on your age. If you're under 40, it's valid for 12 calendar months.
Okay, a year.
However, for those 40 and older, that period is reduced to just 6 months.
6 months. Wow, that does seem very frequent.
It is.
I imagine for airline pilots, keeping up with those medicals is just part of the routine, like pre-flight checks.
Absolutely. It reflects the increased likelihood of age-related health changes.
That makes sense. Okay, so that's the gold standard.
Right.
The first-class medical certificate. Let's move on to the second-class medical certificate.
Okay.
Who typically needs this one, and how does it differ from the first class?
So the second-class medical is required for pilots who are flying commercially, but not necessarily in the airline world.
Okay.
Think of pilots involved in operations like crop dusting,
Oh, okay.
transporting canceled checks overnight,
Interesting.
or any situation where they're being paid to carry passengers or cargo.
Got it. So still professional pilots,
Yes,
but in different sectors of aviation.
exactly different sectors that you might consider.
Right. Okay. So a professional level of flying, but perhaps without the same scale or demands as the major airlines.
Right.
How do the medical requirements for the second class stack up against the first class?
So the requirements still involve a comprehensive medical examination by an AME,
Okay.
and you'll need to demonstrate good overall health, including those specific vision standards we talked about.
Okay.
The key difference here is that an ECG is not routinely required for a second-class medical.
Okay. So a little less emphasis on the cardiac side and the regular checks for second class.
Right, that annual ECG requirement after 40 is specific to the first class.
Got it. What about how long a second class medical is valid for?
A second-class medical certificate is valid for 12 calendar months when you are exercising commercial pilot privileges.
Okay, 1 year.
However, and this is a really important distinction,
Okay.
after those 12 months are up, the privileges of that certificate actually revert to those of a third-class medical for the remainder of its original validity period,
Oh, interesting.
which is 48 months from the date of issue.
Okay, so you could have a second class medical that's technically valid for almost 5 years,
That's right.
but after the first year, you could only use it for the kinds of flying that a third class medical allows.
Exactly.
That's a really helpful way to look at it.
It is.
So let's talk about that third class medical certificate then.
Okay.
This is often the starting point for many aspiring pilots,
right.
right?
Exactly. The third-class medical is the least restrictive of the three,
Okay.
and it's typically what you need to even begin flight training as a student pilot.
Right.
It's for recreational pilots, private pilots, those who are generally flying for personal enjoyment and not for hire.
So if I'm just starting out or flying for fun,
Third class is what you'll need.
got it. So the medical scrutiny should be a little less intense at this level, right?
Yes, the requirement is still a comprehensive medical examination by an AME,
Okay.
and you'll need to demonstrate good overall health, including meeting the vision standards.
Right.
Just like the second class,
Yeah.
an ECG is not routinely required for a third-class medical.
Okay, that makes sense for those just learning or flying for leisure.
Right.
Now, what about the validity period for a third class medical?
Yeah.
I remember seeing some pretty significant differences based on age.
You're absolutely right. The validity periods for a third-class medical are the longest.
Oh, wow.
For pilots under the age of 40, it's valid for a whopping 60 calendar months.
60 months.
That's 5 years.
5 years. That's practically a pilot's lifetime when you're just starting out.
It is.
Wow, it must be a huge relief to not have to worry about medical renewals constantly during those early training days.
Absolutely.
Now, for pilots who are 40 years of age or older, the validity period is 24 calendar months or 2 years.
Right.
5 years and 2 years. That's a big difference depending on your age.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered the three classes, their specific requirements and timelines.
Right.
Are there any general things that apply across the board no matter which medical certificate we're talking about?
Absolutely. There are a few key pieces of information that are relevant regardless of which class of medical certificate you are applying for.
Okay, good to know.
One really important aspect is FAA MedXpress.
MedXpress.
The FAA requires all pilots applying for medical certificate to use this online web application to submit their certification information before their medical examination.
Got it.
It streamlines the process for both you and the AME.
So it's like filling out all your health history digitally before you even walk into the doctor's office.
Exactly.
Makes perfect sense in today's digital world.
It does.
We've mentioned them several times now, but let's just nail down exactly what an aviation medical examiner or AME is.
Sure, an AME is a medical doctor. Could be an MD, a DO, or in some cases other qualified medical professionals.
Okay.
Who has been specifically authorized by the FAA to conduct these medical examinations for pilots and issue medical certificates.
Got it.
They have specialized training in aviation medicine and a deep understanding of the specific health requirements for flying.
So not just any doctor can perform these exams.
That's right.
You need to find one who has that FAA authorization,
Exactly.
right? So it's essential to seek out an AME if you're pursuing a pilot's license.
Absolutely.
We touched on it briefly, but it's worth reiterating that across all three classes, there are fundamental health standards that pilots need to meet, right?
Right.
It's not solely about passing the specific tests for each class.
Exactly. The FAA has established general health standards that apply to all medical certificate applicants.
Okay.
These cover a range of areas critical for safe flight.
Uh-huh.
including your vision, your hearing, your equilibrium. That's your sense of balance,
Right.
as well as your mental, neurological, and cardiovascular health.
Okay, so pretty comprehensive.
It is. If you have a condition in any of these areas that the FAA deems disqualifying it, can impact your ability to obtain or maintain a medical certificate, regardless of whether you're going for first, second, or third class.
Right. So it's a comprehensive evaluation of whether you're medically fit to handle the demands of flight, and the intensity and frequency of those evaluations increase depending on the kind of flying you're doing.
Exactly.
Okay, so just to recap for our listeners, we've got first class for those flying the big airlines with the strictest requirements, including that regular ECG and the shortest validity periods, especially once you're over 40.
Right.
Then there's second class for other commercial pilots, still requiring a thorough check but without the routine ECG. And it's valid for 12 months for commercial operations before reverting to third class privileges.
Right.
And finally, third class for recreational flying and flight training with the longest validity periods, particularly for younger pilots, and also without the routine ECG. And remember, for all of these, you'll need to see an FAA-authorized AME,
Yes.
use MedXPress beforehand,
Yeah.
and meet those overarching health standards.
That's a really clear and accurate summary.
Mhm.
You've highlighted all the crucial differences in purpose, the specific requirements like the ECG and those all-important validity periods.
So considering all of this, it brings up an interesting point.
Yeah.
With these different medical requirements and the varying lengths of time each certificate is valid, what kind of logistical and personal considerations might pilots face at different stages of their aviation journeys?
That's a great question.
It strikes me that someone just starting out on their flight training will have a very different experience with this compared to a seasoned airline captain.
That's a fantastic question to ponder.
Right.
For a younger pilot with aspirations for a long career in aviation,
Yeah.
perhaps beginning with a third class for flight training and eventually aiming for the airlines,
Uh-huh.
they'll need to plan for these increasing medical demands and the associated time and costs. They'll transition from those longer third-class validities to the much more frequent checks of a first class.
Yeah.
Conversely, an older pilot might need to carefully assess their health and how it aligns with the more stringent first-class requirements
Right.
and shorter renewal cycles.
Makes sense.
And for those in commercial operations needing a second class, understanding that shift to third-class privileges after a year is vital for their business planning and what kind of flying they can legally do.
Right.
It really underscores how important it is for anyone involved in flying to proactively manage their health and have a solid grasp of these regulations throughout their entire flying career.
It really does give you something to think about,
It does.
whether you're just curious about aviation or actively pursuing your pilot's license.
Absolutely.
If you want to delve into this in even greater detail, and we highly recommend it if you're serious about flying,
Yep.
be sure to check out the FAA's official resources.
Great advice.
The FAA MedXpress website is essential if you're going for a medical certificate, and they also provide comprehensive information on those potentially disqualifying medical conditions.
That's right.
It's all there to help pilots stay informed and safe up in the skies.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
You're welcome. It was fun.
Always a pleasure.